This cute little girl had just bitten into a strange apple when the scenery around her suddenly changed. Sabrina is a half-human, half-witch girl. She was raised by her two aunts from a young age. She had lived in the human world for nearly 16 years. Now Sabrina's 16th birthday is approaching. Sabrina must choose between going to the wizarding world with her family or staying in the human world with her friends. Her two aunts, of course, want her to inherit her father's legacy and become a powerful witch. Before receiving the dark baptism, Sabrina needs to choose a guardian spirit. Zelda takes out a book for Sabrina to choose from, but with her unique personality from a young age, this time Sabrina wants to summon the spirit herself. As a result, during the summoning process, Sabrina encounters 3 witches from the Witch Academy. They are disgusted by Sabrina's half-human status and cast a curse upon her. Fortunately, with the help of her aunts, the curse is lifted. That evening, as Sabrina returns to her room, a voice suddenly rings out from behind her. It turned out that the spirit she summoned during the day had now transformed into a black cat to protect her. 3 days remained until Sabrina's dark baptism, at which point she would become a true witch. But before that, Sabrina had many questions about joining the dark church. She wanted to become a witch, but didn't want to give up everything in the human world. When she didn't know what to choose, Ambrose offered some advice. Legend said that deep in the forest lay an ancient fruit tree. By eating the forbidden fruit from it, one could see what would happen in the future. But she didn't know that her conversation with Ambrose had been overheard by a raven. The raven then went to Sabrina's teacher's house and recounted their entire conversation. Meanwhile, Sabrina went to the orchard to find the ancient fruit tree when suddenly a scarecrow pulled her inside. Sabrina fled in terror. It turned out that everything was orchestrated by her teacher, who didn't want Sabrina to receive the forbidden fruit. Just as Sabrina was about to be caught, a dark figure appeared and knocked down the scarecrow. It turned out to be Sabrina's guardian spirit who had saved her. The teacher was also angry that her plan had failed. In fact, Sabrina's teacher was no longer the same teacher. A few days earlier, the real teacher had been killed by a witch who had transformed into the teacher's likeness. The witch was a servant of Satan, and her goal was to make Sabrina submit to Satan. At this moment, Sabrina had found the forbidden fruit. She took a bite of the apple, and immediately the apple in her hand rotted and sprouted cute little creatures. The tree before her was covered in corpses, and a bull-headed monster emerged from its trunk. Advancing towards Sabrina, Sabrina then spat out the apple, which brought her back to reality. The recent events had terrified Sabrina, so she decided against accepting the dark baptism. However, upon returning home, she discovered an uninvited guest. It turned out to be Faustus of the Dark Church, the representative of the Dark Lord Satan on Earth. He had come to answer Sabrina's questions. Faustus told Sabrina that the prophecy of the forbidden fruit wasn't entirely trustworthy, and that making a pact with Satan could offer more benefits. Her father, a former grand sorcerer, surely also hoped she would become a witch. Furthermore, she would have the freedom to choose whether or not to leave the church later. Under Faustus's persuasion, Sabrina agreed to the dark baptism. But before that, she wanted to help her friend. Her friend at school had suffered prolonged abuse, so Sabrina intended to use magic to punish the abusers. The girl had been harassed by boys for a long time. Her best friend had reported it to the teacher, but the teacher had not cared. So Sabrina, possessing half-cursed witchy blood, prepared to use her witchy methods to help her best friend punish the tormentors. Sabrina sought out the 3 witches who had cursed her, wanting them to help her punish the 4 boys. The witches said they could help, but she had to promise not to attend the Witch Academy again. Sabrina outwardly agreed, but secretly raised her right hand behind her back in a gesture of counterattack. This way, even if Sabrina broke her promise later, the magic wouldn't affect her. Sabrina and the others lured the 4 boys into a cave. Then the witches used magic to make the boys see a gruesome scene of flesh and bones flying everywhere. Sabrina took out her camera and photographed their impressive spectacle, warning them not to torment their friends again. The witches were still not satisfied, revealing their demonic forms, causing them to scream in terror. Soon it was Sabrina's 16th birthday. Under the crescent moon, Sabrina's white dress suddenly turned black. She stepped through the teleportation gate and saw everyone in the dark church. Sabrina knelt before Faustus for him to perform the pre-baptism ritual. But as soon as Faustus tore Sabrina's palm for her to sign the Book of Creatures, the prophetic vision vision from the forbidden fruit flashed through her mind. Sabrina saw the figures of her parents again. Sabrina recoiled and fled the baptism ceremony. But Sabrina didn't know that, because of her actions, she and her aunts were all accused by Satan before the witchcraft court. Her two aunts were stripped of their magical powers, and their bodies were aging rapidly. At this time, Ambrose told Sabrina that there was once a lawyer who was very knowledgeable in witchcraft law. Legend said he had even defeated a demon in court, so Sabrina sought out this lawyer. After talking to him, she learned that her father had once helped the lawyer. This time, the lawyer agreed to defend her as a way of repaying the favor. At the witchcraft court, Faustus accused Sabrina. Sabrina had promised to sign a contract with Satan, but at the last minute, she canceled the agreement. At this point, the lawyer stated that their accusation was completely unfounded, with no concrete evidence to prove that Sabrina had canceled the contract. Faustus presented the Book of Creatures. They were astonished to find Sabrina's signature on it. After confirmation from Sabrina's aunts, the name on the book was signed by her father when she was 3 days old. This undoubtedly dealt a heavy blow to Sabrina. This evidence was clearly unfavorable to Sabrina, but the lawyer did not give up. He told the judge that Sabrina was a half-human, half-witch hybrid, and the human lineage within her had the right to be judged under human law. Currently, they were disputing Sabrina's identity. The way to prove whether Sabrina was a witch or not was to have her undress and examine the witch mark on her body in front of everyone. If there was no mark, they would withdraw the lawsuit. Sabrina was certain she didn't have the mark they were talking about, and to help her two aunts regain their youth and magical powers, she agreed to let them examine her. But in the end, Sabrina's youngest aunt couldn't accept it. Hilda revealed a secret she had kept for 16 years. It turned out that on the second day after Sabrina was born, her mother had taken her to be baptized as a Catholic, and the witness was her youngest aunt. All of this proved that the promise between Sabrina and Satan was legally invalid. Just as they were about to win the case, the gates of hell suddenly opened. The lawyer and Faustus entered to negotiate with Satan. In the final negotiations, Satan conceded Sabrina could retain her human life, but only on the condition that she attend the Witch Academy. This seemed to be the outcome Sabrina desired most. Later, her two aunts also regained their magical powers. However, in reality, Satan's temporary concession was also to keep Sabrina under their control. When Sabrina arrived at the Magic Academy, she encountered the three witches from before. Because her mother was immortal, Sabrina faced ostracism from the other witches at the academy. There was even a tradition within the academy that newcomers had to endure their torment. At midnight, they dragged Sabrina outside, forced her to take off her coat, and made her stand in the cold, damp night until dawn. She was forbidden to turn around, no matter what sound she heard. Soon, the voices of her parents echoed from behind Sabrina. Sabrina knew they were demons in disguise, their purpose being to make her turn around. She persevered and finally survived the night. At that moment, a boy appeared behind her. Sabrina warned him that it was dangerous and that he should leave, but the boy ignored her and led Sabrina to a grave. It turned out that the boy had died long ago. Only his soul remained in the forest. Many others were like him, all having died in the witches' trials. Knowing this, Sabrina quickly called Zelda for help. Zelda went to the headmaster of the Witch Academy, wanting him to stop the students' actions, but the headmaster argued that such acts of violence were a heaing tradition of the school, a way for the strong to eliminate the weak. Since the headmaster didn't want to intervene, they had to handle it themselves. Seeing so many innocent children die unjustly, the witches were heartbroken and decided to help them get revenge. That night, the three witch sisters came to Sabrina again. They used a rope to tie around Sabrina's neck so that she could experience the feeling of being hanged. They asked Sabrina if she had any last words. Sabrina said yes, that the academy's tradition of killing people would end tonight. At this point, the witches pulled the rope but found Sabrina didn't move. The spirits of the deceased gathered and bowed, chanting a spell. The three witch sisters suddenly floated in the air, their necks seemingly held by something. Having killed so many people before, this was the first time the three sisters had encountered such a formidable opponent, so they had to compromise with Sabrina. The next day, the eldest sister went to the headmaster's office. It turned out that everything was at the headmaster's command. The headmaster was angry at their failure. The three of them had been so pathetic dealing with a new student. Therefore, the headmaster prepared a difficult challenge for Sabrina. It was a magical box that would test her willpower. If she could solve the mechanism of the river Styx, Sabrina could learn powerful summoning techniques. Sabrina was confident she could open it, given what her father had left behind. As expected, she had found the method to open the mechanism in her father's notes. When the mechanism was opened, sand spilled everywhere. At the same time, the lights began to flicker, and strange sounds came from outside the door. Sabrina went to her aunt's room to recount what had just happened. It turned out that Sabrina had just deciphered the Styx River mechanism and released the demon. The urgent task was to seal the entire house, then find an opportunity to seal the demon. After the house was sealed, the demon appeared before them. At this moment, Zelda stepped out, holding a vial, and chanted a spell. Then the demon was sealed inside the vial. They thought this crisis was over, but in reality, they had fallen into the demon's trap. It was a sleeping demon that could control dreams. At this moment, everyone in the room was immersed in a dream. In the dream, Sabrina and her boyfriend walk down the aisle, but as the ceremony begins, her boyfriend suddenly grabs her by the neck and locks her in a box full of sharp thorns. At this moment, a sleeping demon appears before Sabrina, trying to trick her into revealing the spell to seal the house. Meanwhile, Lilith, disguised as Sabrina's teacher, sees Sabrina's situation through a mirror. She's a spy sent by Satan to monitor Sabrina, so she naturally cannot stand by and watch Sabrina suffer. Therefore, Lilith uses magic to enter Sabrina's dream. She tells Sabrina that it's all a dream, and that she will wake her up soon so she can quickly escape. Lilith takes out a doll and pricks its palm with a needle. The next moment, Sabrina wakes from her dream, but instead of escaping, Sabrina must find a way to save her family, so she imitates Lilith's method, sets an alarm, and hypnotizes herself. She also enters the dreams of her aunts. Sabrina learned how to defeat the sleeping demon from Hilda. She found Hilda's spider spirit. As she began knitting, the sleeping demon was also enveloped in a spider web. The sleeping demon was defeated, and everyone woke up. After this, Sabrina began to suspect the teacher's identity, so she went to the teacher and questioned her true identity. At this time, Lilith told Sabrina that she was once Sabrina's father's subordinate, and that her father had entrusted her with protecting Sabrina. But Sabrina still couldn't accept the feeling of being monitored, so she asked Lilith to leave her life. But Sabrina didn't know that the demon was about to reappear beside her. Meanwhile, a young man was painting intently when suddenly a figure appeared before him. It wasn't until his brother called him that he snapped back to reality. It was just Nicholas's hallucination. But it wasn't just Nicholas who had hallucinations. Rosalind, who came to the kitchen to get something in the evening, also saw this figure. Another girl experienced a similar situation. The three of them were hallucinating because of something that happened a few days earlier. The figure they saw was Susie's uncle. Susie's uncle had shown signs of mental instability shortly before leaving the mine. Rosalind and Nicholas, being Susie's good friends, visited her at her house. But as soon as Nicholas sat down, Susie's uncle suddenly stood up and grabbed Nicholas by the neck. In that critical moment, Susie knocked Jesse unconscious with a water bottle, saving Nicholas. For everyone's safety, they bound Jesse's limbs tightly. From then on, the three of them frequently experienced hallucinations. Nicholas told this story to his girlfriend, Sabrina. Sabrina, who was attending a nearby witch school, immediately realized Jesse was possessed by a demon. She went home and told her two aunts. However, the Witches' Guild had rules against interfering in the affairs of mortals. Sabrina couldn't bear to see her friends in danger, so she decided to investigate first. To avoid revealing her witch identity, she used her astral projection magic and went to Susie's uncle's room. When the demon knew that Sabrina was a witch, it became even more aggressive. It told Sabrina its name was Ambrose, a demon from within. While they were talking, the demon suddenly attacked Sabrina. Fortunately, Sabrina was in a spirit state, so the poison passed right through her. But soon after, Sabrina suddenly felt unwell, and her real body convulsed in pain. Ambrose quickly noticed and used magic to forcibly awaken Sabrina. It seemed the demon's methods were not simple at all. They even discovered that the name the demon Stumpy told Sabrina was fake. It was just a malicious prank, as Ambrose sounds like cream when read backwards. It seems that to fully understand the situation, they need to investigate from the beginning. So Nicholas and Sabrina went into the mine where Jesse worked. Sure enough, there, Sabrina discovered a damaged stone statue. Through research, they learned the origin of the demon. It turned out the demon was a parasitic demon called octopus. Sabrina asked her teacher at the Witch Academy how to perform exorcisms, but the teacher told Sabrina that exorcism was something only Christians could do. Witches weren't allowed and couldn't perform it. However, Sabrina refused to give up and even told her aunt that if there was really no other way, she would have to go to a Christian church for help. A witch seeking help from a Christian church was unheard of. At that point, Lilith told Sabrina that she knew of a spell that could use a witch's abilities to exorcise demons. Sabrina then went before the demon and began chanting, but Sabrina was only a half-witch at that point. With her current abilities, she was fundamentally unable to drive the demon away. In the end, it was Zelda who intervened to subdue the demon. With everyone's combined efforts, Apophis was finally sealed away. Sabrina thought she had saved Susie's uncle, but the next day Susie told Sabrina that her uncle had passed away the previous night. In reality, the demon's appearance and and Sabrina's exorcism were all Lilith's doing. The previous night, after the exorcism, she had even cast Susie's spell. It seemed all of this was part of Satan's plan. Witches drew lots there annually. The one chosen by Satan became the head witch. But becoming the head witch wasn't a good thing. The head witch sacrificed her body during the All Saints festival for everyone to enjoy. This was a long-standing tradition of the Dark Church, also to commemorate the sacrifices of their ancestors. That year, Sabrina's family was chosen to draw lots. This was also the first time Sabrina knew that witches had this kind of festival. Although she found the festival very confusing, there was nothing she could do about it. This year, Zelda represented her family in the lottery. Seeing Sabrina's worried expression, Zelda comforted her, saying that their family had participated in the lottery a few times before, and the probability of being chosen among 14 was still quite small. Sabrina knew that no matter how much she advised her, she couldn't change Zelda's mind, so she wanted to use practical action to stop her. Just as the witches were drawing lots, Sabrina suddenly burst in. In front of all the witches, she announced that she would represent her family in the lottery. Sabrina had expected Zelda to oppose this tradition because of her, but Sabrina's actions caught Zelda off guard. Did Sabrina intend to oppose the entire witches' meeting? The aunts had no choice but to let Sabrina participate in her place. After everyone had drawn a paper, Faustus ordered the witches to set fire to the paper in their hands. However, Sabrina's paper didn't burn. Sabrina, who thought she had been chosen, was suddenly met with great excitement from the witch beside her. It turned out that the one truly chosen to be the head witch was Prudence. Sabrina had drawn the paper to become her lady-in-waiting. Prudence would enjoy the highest honor during Nestember these days, and Sabrina had to fulfill all of Prudence's demands before the All Saints festival began. That evening, Prudence came to Sabrina's house. Sabrina wanted to persuade Prudence to run away, but witchcraft traditions were deeply ingrained in Prudence's mind. She even felt chosen as an honor, so Sabrina sought out Lilith, asking her to help persuade Prudence. Lilith led them into the forest, where an old witch lived. Years earlier, Hecate had been chosen as the head witch, but she had ultimately run away. Sabrina asked Hecate why she was hiding from Satan. Hecate told Sabrina that she wasn't hiding from Satan, but from the high priestess of that year. Initially, Hecate was happy to be chosen as the head witch, but one day before the All Saints festival, her high priestess said she had received a revelation from Satan and wanted to possess Hecate, so Hecate fled the Dark Church. Sabrina wanted to use this to let Prudence know that becoming the head witch wasn't Satan's will. It was more likely Demise. Faustus wanted her to become queen, but Prudence always believed that Faustus, who treated her like a daughter, wouldn't harm her. At this point, Sabrina gave up trying to persuade her, but that night, when Sabrina returned home, things changed. Sabrina discovered that Faustus's wife had come to see Zelda for a prenatal checkup. Lady, overly worried about the unborn child, had uttered strange words, claiming that the three witch sisters were plotting to harm her child. Therefore, Lady decided to eliminate one of them first. Lady's words aroused Sabrina's suspicion. Sabrina suspected that Prudence might be Faustus's biological daughter, and that her selection as head witch wasn't divine. Perhaps Lady wanted to use this opportunity to eliminate Prudence. To prove her suspicion, that night Sabrina used magic in a cake, forcing anyone who ate it to tell the truth. At this point, Sabrina asked her question, and everything became clear. Just as Sabrina suspected, Prudence was indeed Faustus's biological daughter. Lady had used a spell during the draw, which is why Prudence was chosen as head witch. Prudence asked Faustus if he was her father, and Faustus readily admitted it. Sabrina then asked if Faustus had killed Prudence's mother, and he confessed that he had indirectly caused her death because he didn't want to marry her. The witches asked if they were also Faustus's daughters, but he said they were orphans. Now everything was in complete chaos, and Prudence could no longer offer herself as a sacrifice. To reassure the witches, Faustus said he had received a revelation from Satan and that this year's All Saints' Day was cancelled. But one witch refused to accept this and set herself on fire, offering herself as a sacrifice. The witches who had been waiting for so long began to feast. The All Saints' Day ended, and Sabrina thought she could return to her peaceful life, but trouble kept piling up. Her sister, wielding a hammer, angrily stormed into the vegetable garden, without hesitation slashing her younger sister to death and burying Hilda in the garden. That night, Hilda miraculously came back to life. Clearly not the first time Hilda had died. Every time Hilda did something wrong, her sister slashed her. The niece Sabrina asked Hilda about what it felt like to die, and if it hurt. Hilda replied that it depended on the weapon Zelda used. As for Hilda's resurrection, it wasn't due to magic, but rather a piece of land. Their vegetable garden contained a plot of land taken from Cain's garden, but only witches could be resurrected through this land. While Sabrina was discussing death, two of the three witch sisters were preparing to use magic to kill her boyfriend. They chanted a spell, hoping hoping the witch hunter would suffer whippings and stoning. The town's mine had collapsed and Harvey and his brother were trapped inside. Harvey had escaped, but his brother Tommy was not so lucky. The rescue team only found Tommy's helmet. The loss of his brother was a huge shock to Harvey. He even blamed himself for his brother's death. Sabrina didn't want to see Nicholas so devastated. She wanted to use magic to resurrect Tommy. Sabrina knew her aunts would certainly not agree to her using magic to resurrect mortals, so she turned to Lilith for help. Lilith did indeed possess a resurrection spell, but this magic was too unnatural, and the price to pay was enormous. Only a life for a life would the spell be effective. After hearing this, Sabrina gave up on the idea of resurrecting Tommy, but the next day things changed. Sabrina's classmate had recently acquired psychic abilities. At Tommy's brother's funeral, when Rosalind touched the helmet, a vision flashed through Rosalind's mind. Two girls in ruffled dresses appeared before Rosalind, repeatedly smashing a doll with stones. As a witch herself, Sabrina immediately recognized them as two of the three witch sisters. Sabrina suddenly realized that Tommy's death wasn't an accident, but the result of their magic. Sabrina sought out their eldest sister, Prudence, and told her about it. Sabrina had saved Prudence before, so Prudence owed her a debt of gratitude. Sabrina devised a complete plan to both punish the two witches and resurrect Tommy. At midnight, they went to the forest, set up a magic circle, and chanted a spell. Then, Sabrina slit the throat of one of the witches, but in reality, Sabrina didn't actually want to kill her, but rather bury her in her garden. Sabrina wanted to revive Tommy this way, without sacrificing anyone. At this moment, Ambrose discovered Sabrina. He believed her reckless actions would only cause more trouble, but Sabrina completely ignored his advice, thinking her plan was perfect. She thought Tommy would be resurrected in 13 hours, but after a whole day, Tommy still hadn't revived. Sabrina initially thought the magic had failed, but when she went to find Harvey, she discovered Tommy had just returned home. Tommy had indeed been resurrected, but he was completely different from before. He didn't speak a word, didn't even seem to think, like a wandering soul. At the same time, something happened at the Wizarding Academy. The witch resurrected with Earth was very weak and kept vomiting dirt. The situation worsened, and her two aunts also discovered about it. Zelda was furious and said she would take Tommy back to where he belonged, but Sabrina stubbornly refused to give up. She knew Tommy's soul was still at the border of hell, and she would go and retrieve it, Zelda said. Sabrina did not have the necessary magic to cross the boundary, and that Sabrina had been just a 16-year-old girl, not a grand sorceress. Sabrina angrily told Zelda she was not her mother and should not pretend to be one and lecture her. Hilda angrily told Sabrina not to be disrespectful to Zelda. Deeply hurt by Sabrina's words, Zelda decided not to interfere anymore and let Sabrina handle it herself. At that point, Sabrina still had not realized her mistake. She sought out Lilith, asking for her help to reach the border of hell. They arrived at the border's entrance. Sabrina recited a spell, and the gate opened. Stepping inside, they were met with a forest shrouded in smoke. While searching for Tommy's soul, Sabrina unexpectedly saw her mother's soul. Before Sabrina could ask any questions, a Dementor appeared. In her escape from the Dementor, she found Tommy's soul, but as soon as Sabrina took Tommy's soul out, the Dementor seized it. His soul completely vanished, meaning Tommy could never be resurrected. Finally, with no other option, Sabrina confessed her witch identity to Harvey and told him everything about how she had resurrected Tommy. Now Sabrina had to bring Tommy back, which also meant Harvey would once again experience the pain of losing his brother. Sabrina told Nicholas to let Tommy rest in peace, which is why she wanted things back on track and wanted to bring the people in Tommy's room back. Finally, Harvey decided to take matters into his own hands, pointing his shotgun at Sabrina. As the gunshot rang out, a rift appeared in the relationship between Sabrina and Harvey, but she didn't know that Satan would then set one trap after another for her to sign the monster book. The girl arranged to meet the boy in the small grove at midnight, but at the crucial moment, she hesitated. Suddenly, her expression changed, and when she turned around, her classmate's face had transformed into Lilith's. The boy panicked, and the next second, Lilith grabbed his hair, ending his life with a single blow. At the same time, 13 figures suddenly appeared around her. It turned out they were all witches. Years ago, they had been killed by mortals. The Witches' Guild could have united to save them, but the Dark Church chose to stand by and watch. This time, Lilith summoned the souls of these 13 witches by sacrificing living beings. Within 24 hours, they could roam the world seeking revenge. Their hatred was extremely deep. Both mortals and witches were targets of their vengeance. The 13 witches gathered and summoned the powerful angel of death. Ambrose discovered the witches gathering. As he approached to investigate, a witch suddenly appeared, grabbed Ambrose by the neck, and told him to return and warn everyone in the Dark Church. Ambrose reported this to the witches in the Dark Church. Upon hearing the news, chaos ensued. ensued. Finally, Faustus summoned all the witches to the church to face the impending crisis together. But Sabrina had no intention of hiding in the dark church. She wanted to protect her mortal friends. What surprised Sabrina was that Zelda had agreed to stay and protect the mortals in the town this time. The urgent task was to gather everyone in the town. Hilda then thought of a way they could use magic to summon a storm so that everyone in the town would go to the designated shelter to escape the disaster. They then took out a basin of water and began chanting spells to summon wind spirits from all directions. As the alarm sounded, everyone in the town went to the shelter. At this time, the 13 witches had also arrived at the entrance. Sabrina and the 3 others had also placed protective charms on the shelter. As long as they maintained their focus, they could very well withstand the witches' attack. But then Faustus used a summoning spell and teleported Zelda to his side. It turned out that Faustus's wife was about to give birth, and he needed her to help his wife deliver the baby. Without Zelda's power, they could only barely hold out. But at this moment, Ambrose suddenly disappeared. His best friend, worried about his safety, summoned him as well. On the other side of the shelter, only Sabrina and Hilda remained, completely helpless against the witch's attack. Just as Sabrina was about to despair, Lilith appeared. She told Sabrina that there was only one last way to save everyone, so they left Hilda alone to hold the line, while Lilith took Sabrina to the place of the black baptism. Now, to save the town, the only way was for Sabrina to sign the monster book, thus becoming a true witch and using the power within her to defeat the 13 witches. To protect her family and friends, Sabrina finally compromised. At that moment, Satan appeared behind her, slashed Sabrina's palm, and signed her name. Suddenly, a powerful light flashed, and Sabrina's body transformed. Then Lilith took Sabrina to the tree where the 13 witches were summoned. Sabrina ordered the 13 witches to stop and leave in silence, or else they should not blame her for her anger, but the witches refused. Finally, Sabrina summoned hellfire, and the 13 witches and the tree were engulfed in flames. When their souls were consumed, the town finally returned to peace. Harvey knew Sabrina had saved everyone, and he had also overcome the pain of losing his brother. He wanted to reconcile with Sabrina, but she refused. Sabrina knew that from the moment she and Healer signed the monster book, everything had changed. For mortals, perhaps keeping their distance from her was the safest option. Sabrina also poured all her energy into the Witch Academy, but it was only the beginning. A man was writing documents in a room. At that moment, Ambrose suddenly noticed someone staring at him in the mirror, but when he turned around, the body on the bed was motionless. Ambrose thought he was just seeing things because he was too tired, but when he picked up the mirror, again, the woman suddenly stood up. Ambrose realized something was wrong. He pretended to turn around, and sure enough, the woman reappeared behind him. Luckily, Ambrose reacted quickly, using magic to knock her down. It seemed there was something unclean in their house. At this moment, all the cupboard doors were moving. On the other side, Hilda also experienced something strange. The rolling pin she had just used suddenly disappeared. Even the cleaver was nowhere to be seen. When Hilda looked up, all the tools were falling from the sky. Meanwhile, on Zelda's side, the sewing machine suddenly started automatically. When Zelda went to check, the machine displayed the message, "Your baby is with us." When Zelda returned, she discovered the baby in the crib had disappeared. The whole family searched together and finally found the baby in the oven. When Ambrose came up from the basement and recounted what had happened, everyone understood that there was a mischievous little demon causing trouble in the house. These playful little demons were very difficult to get rid of. Only a forest witch living in the mountains could take them away. But this witch had one bad habit. She always adopted orphans as her own. Therefore, Zelda told Sabrina to hide the baby in the basement. The forest witch heard their calls and came into the house. Zelda offered a generous reward, and the forest witch agreed to take the little devil away. But as the witch was about to leave, the baby in the basement started crying. The witch suddenly became excited and told everyone that she wanted to take the baby. At this moment, Sabrina's mother's spirit suddenly appeared. She said she would use a fair competition to decide ownership of the baby. She drew a circle on the ground and placed the baby in the middle. Zelda and the witch each held one of the baby's hands. Whoever pulled the baby out of the circle would own the baby. In the end, Zelda, not wanting the baby to suffer, let go, so the baby belonged to the forest witch. But when the witch brought the baby back, the baby in her arms had turned into a teddy bear. It turned out that when the baby cried, Sabrina's mother had appeared and taught her how to use magic to swap the babies. At this moment, Sabrina's friend Rosalind suddenly brought bad news. Susie, while working part-time, had been kidnapped by her boss, who was posing as Santa Claus. In reality, the boss was a demon who enjoyed abducting children and making them into living wax figures. Hearing this, Zelda suddenly had an idea. They didn't need to act themselves. The forest witch was obsessed with children and would show no mercy to those who harmed them. so they told the forest witch the news, and she went to rescue Susie. The witch wouldn't take children with relatives like Susie, so she told Susie to leave. Afterward, the demon suffered the witch's furious revenge. Following this incident, Zelda understood that the child was unsafe with them. Therefore, Zelda decided to send the child away to be raised by someone else. To elaborate a little, this child was originally the daughter of Faustus from the Dark Church. The wife of the Dark Church died after giving birth to twins, and Faustus was very prejudiced against women. If Faustus had known his daughter was born first, he certainly wouldn't have kept her. Therefore, Zelda secretly brought the baby back during childbirth. Meanwhile, Sabrina had previously seen her mother's spirit at the border of hell, so she had used a summoning spell to temporarily summon her mother's spirit. What Sabrina wanted to know was why her mother was wandering at the border of hell. Did she have some unresolved issues? But in reality, her mother was simply worried that Sabrina wouldn't receive love and protection, so she didn't want to leave. Now that she saw Sabrina being well cared for by her two aunts, she no longer had anything to worry about. Finally, Sabrina's mother left and went to the afterlife, but Sabrina didn't know that 3 more demons were about to arrive beside her. As a witch, her daily worry was choosing clothes. Sabrina found that the youthful schoolgirl style wasn't right. The simple elegance didn't seem to work either. Glamorous fashion seemed okay, and the minimalist classic style was acceptable. Indeed, black suited the aura of a witch. Even the black cat beside her thought so. Today was a special day for Sabrina. She had taken a leave of absence from her regular school and was now a full-time student at the Witch Academy. But what Sabrina didn't expect was that on the first day of the new semester, her troubles would continue. When she went to the library alone to study, a demon suddenly appeared. The demon bent down and released a swarm of small mice. Luckily, Sabrina found the exorcism spell on a nearby bookshelf. Sabrina initially ignored it, but on her way back, another demon appeared behind her. This demon released countless bats from within its cloak. Sabrina panicked and ran, hiding under a rock. She took out her magic flute. Its piercing sound was also the bane of bats. The bat demon had no choice but to temporarily retreat. Things were getting stranger and stranger. Sabrina suspected that perhaps the people at the Witch Academy had not wanted her to stay and had summoned demons to attack her. Therefore, the next day, Sabrina temporarily skipped the Witch Academy and returned to her regular high school. But the ordeal was not over yet. A demon appeared behind Sabrina and bound her. When Sabrina woke up, she found the demon surrounded by flies. The fly demon's purpose was the same as the 2 previous demons, to destroy the half-witch Sabrina. At that moment, Lilith appeared just in time. With a wave of her hand, the fly demon vanished. To clarify the situation, Sabrina went to find Nicholas at the Witch Academy. Through research, they discovered that the 3 demons that had attacked Sabrina were the 3 plague kings of the underworld. Demons of this level could not be summoned by ordinary people. Even the 2 of them could not do it alone. To find out who had wanted to devour her, Sabrina and Nicholas teamed up and summoned the 3 plague kings. Sabrina asked who had sent them, and the 3 demons told her they had not been under anyone's command. They had only wanted to devour the illegitimate child and said that the half-breed witch could not ascend to the throne. At that point, Faustus suddenly intervened and banished all 3 demons. In the end, Sabrina and the others still did not get the answer they wanted, but it was not just Sabrina who felt suspicious. Lilith also heard what the Plague King had said. Lilith began to doubt Satan's plan, so she summoned Satan. Satan then told Lilith that the gates of hell would open and Sabrina would become his messenger. Satan's words made Lilith a little jealous. She believed that Sabrina's nature belonged to the light and that she could not take on such an important position. So Satan and Lilith made a challenge. If Satan uncovered Sabrina's dark side, Lilith would no longer doubt him. Conversely, if Sabrina remained steadfast in her good nature, Lilith would become Satan's queen. So that night, Satan appeared before Sabrina's bed. He told Sabrina that it was time for her to surrender to the darkness. But what Sabrina didn't expect was that Satan's request was simply to steal a box of chewing gum from a store. However, when Sabrina went to the store to get the gum, she was caught by Lilith. Feeling guilty, Sabrina put down the gum and hurried away. This incident happened, and Sabrina never completed Satan's task, until one day, she suddenly discovered a claw mark on her shoulder. So Sabrina went to beg Lilith for help. It turned out that this claw mark was called the Devil's Claw. The appearance of this claw mark showed that she was rebelling against Satan. Satan's request for Sabrina to steal chewing gum was no small matter. Don't underestimate its influence because of a small evil deed. A small act can make you succumb to evil. This was also a battle of wills. Only by maintaining her righteous beliefs could Sabrina avoid being swayed by Satan. But things weren't that simple. Sabrina discovered that her resistance not only affected herself, but also brought misfortune upon her family. family and friends. That evening, upon returning home, Sabrina suddenly found her guardian spirit weakened. Sabrina couldn't bear it any longer. She questioned Satan about why he was harming those around her. Satan questioned her about why she defied his orders to steal the chewing gum. Sabrina said she would go steal it, but Satan said it was too late. Now he wanted Sabrina to make a greater sacrifice than burning down her school. After the conversation ended, Satan told Sabrina to burn down Baxter High School, otherwise he would demand an even greater sacrifice next time. Finally, Sabrina gave in. She took the gasoline and went to the school. Just as she was about to light it, Satan stopped her again. It turned out Satan's goal had been achieved. All he needed was for Sabrina to prove her loyalty. The claw marks on Sabrina's body disappeared, and her soul recovered. Satan had won the bet, but Lilith had no intention of giving up so easily. Meanwhile, Sabrina was celebrating her first Witch Valentine's Day at the Witch Academy. It was the annual Witch Valentine's Day, and unlike the ordinary Valentine's Day, they celebrated for 3 days. On the first day, all the witches gathered. The male witches sat while the female witches danced to the music. When the music ended, the female witch would sit on the male witch closest to her. Sabrina went to where Nicholas was waiting, but the moment the music stopped, the third witch in the group of 3 witches suddenly pushed Sabrina down and sat on Nicholas. Sabrina slowly got up and walked towards the last witch. At this moment, the witch turned around, and the one paired with Sabrina was Nicholas. The third witch then realized that the one in her arms was another witch. It turned out Nicholas had anticipated her interference with him and Sabrina, so he bribed a witch to disguise himself. On the evening of the second day, the couples ventured deep into the forest. Traditionally, they had to undress, anoint themselves with holy oil, and lie under the sacred moonlight to absorb the energy of the moon goddess. During this time, they had to control their emotions and refrain from doing anything inappropriate. As Sabrina and Nicholas were chatting happily, a wolf's howl startled them both. Nicholas became visibly tense and pulled Sabrina away from the forest. To avoid missing Valentine's Day, Sabrina and Nicholas went to a party for ordinary people. During the dance, the atmosphere between them grew increasingly intimate. After the party, they went to the library, preparing for their next move. Suddenly, a pair of wolf eyes stared at them from behind a bookshelf. They both saw the werewolf emerge. They quickly ran outside, Nicholas chanting a spell and sealing the library door. It turned out that the werewolf was Nicholas's guardian spirit. Since Nicholas was born, the werewolf had always been by his side. After Nicholas's relatives died, the werewolf became his only family. As Nicholas grew older and started dating, the werewolf became jealous. Its jealousy was terrifying. It wouldn't allow anyone to approach Nicholas in any way. Eventually, Nicholas banished it to another continent, and Nicholas didn't know how it returned. Lilith told Nicholas that a similar incident had happened before at the Dark Church. The possessions of the bee spirits were incredibly powerful. They would harm everyone around them. To protect Sabrina's safety, the only way was to catch the werewolf. Nicholas also knew that if he truly wanted to be with Sabrina, this was the only path. He took his weapon and went alone to the werewolf's cave. Not long after, Nicholas returned with a chipped axe and a distraught expression. Holding a heart in his hand, Sabrina was moved by Nicholas's sacrifice. They agreed to spend the last night of Valentine's Day together. The last night was special. The female witches played Little Red Riding Hood, and the male witches played Big Wolf. But the hunt was reversed. Little Red Riding Hood hunted Big Wolf. Tonight, everyone could freely unleash their desires. When the hunt began, the Little Red Riding Hoods all rushed towards the big wolf they loved. Sabrina arrived at the meeting place with Nicholas, but what she didn't expect was that instead of waiting for Nicholas, she encountered his ghost. The werewolf advanced towards Sabrina, completely ignoring everything she said. At that moment, Nicholas appeared and begged the werewolf not to harm Sabrina, saying she was the one he loved. Hearing this, the werewolf exploded in rage, lunging straight at Nicholas. Seeing this, Sabrina drew her dagger and stabbed the werewolf in the back. Not long after, the werewolf stopped breathing. Nicholas was heartbroken by the loss of the werewolf's soul. He still couldn't bring himself to kill his only remaining relative. The day before, Nicholas had only tied it up in the cave. With Sabrina's comforting words, Nicholas gradually calmed down. After Valentine's Day, Sabrina and Nicholas's relationship stabilized, but then she suddenly discovered that her parents' deaths were closely related to Faustus. She turned around and was surprised to see her father's ghost appear in the attic. Sabrina rushed to her father's side. He told Sabrina that his and her mother's deaths were not accidents, but were caused by Faustus of the church. He also instructed Sabrina to complete her mission before disappearing. Sabrina returned home and told Zelda about it, but Zelda believed it was a lie to prevent her wedding. Faustus and Zelda had fallen in love on the recent Witch Valentine's Day, so they they decided to hold the wedding a few days later. In reality, Zelda was marrying Faustus, not out of love, but to strengthen her family, so Zelda wouldn't cancel the engagement because of Sabrina's words. Therefore, Sabrina sought help from Lilith. Lilith told her the location of her father's plane crash. Sabrina only needed to find her father's declaration from years ago and give it to the Pope to fulfill his dying wish. Sabrina and Nicholas used witchcraft and found her father's proclamation at the sea, where he met his tragic end years ago. Upon examining the documents, they discovered that the doctrines and reforms of the Dark Church that her father had written were completely contrary to Faustus's. Faustus wanted to reform the Dark Church into an era of male dominance and female subjugation. He had also invited the Pope to the wedding. Just as Faustus was about to present his proclamation to the Pope, Sabrina burst through the door. She also handed the Pope her father's proclamation. The Pope, who had previously held Sabrina's father in high regard, told them he would return to his room to carefully consider their proposals. Sabrina's appearance disrupted Faustus's plans and posed an even greater threat to him. To prevent the Pope from choosing Sabrina's father's proposal, Faustus resorted to an emergency plan. At that moment, Ambrose's stomach, responsible for protecting the Pope, rumbled, and his expression changed. Then a scream shattered the night's silence. Everyone rushed to the Pope's chambers, only to find 3 bodyguards had impaled the Pope. Faustus then tried to silence them, but luckily Ambrose quickly used teleportation magic to escape. Ambrose was at a bar, his stomach churning, and he vomited. He vomited up a rat, which was the very soul Faustus had given him. This also showed that Ambrose was under Faustus's control. Meanwhile, even after the Pope's death, Faustus decided to proceed with the wedding as planned. To prevent all of this, Sabrina and Nicholas used disguise magic to impersonate their deceased parents. In front of all the witches, they accused Faustus of orchestrating their impalement, but their trickery didn't fool Faustus at all. With just one spell, they were back to their original state. At this moment, Ambrose suddenly appeared behind Faustus, intending to assassinate him, but was subdued by the eldest of the 3 witch sisters. Ambrose was therefore captured and imprisoned in a dark underground prison. Sabrina and Nicholas were also expelled from the Witch Academy. Zelda and Faustus went on their honeymoon to Rome. Sabrina wanted to secretly rescue Ambrose, but because she had been expelled, she couldn't open the academy doors. Meanwhile, 3 witch hunters arrived in town. One of the witch hunters targeted Sabrina. Taking advantage of Sabrina being home alone, he knocked on her door and claimed to be a missionary. Just as the witch hunter was about to strike, the phone suddenly rang. It turned out to be her classmate with supernatural abilities. At that moment, when Rosalind touched Sabrina's belongings, an image of Sabrina being hissed suddenly appeared in Rosalind's mind. So Rosalind quickly called Sabrina. Upon hearing the news, Sabrina turned around and indeed saw the witch hunter drawing his dagger. Sabrina panicked and ran out of the house, using witchcraft to lock the front door. When the hunters burst through the door, Sabrina rode away on her bicycle. She went to find Hilda for help, only to discover that Hilda had also just been attacked by the witch hunters. They wanted to quickly inform the people of the Witch Academy, but they had all been expelled and couldn't enter the academy. Meanwhile, the witch hunters had found a way to open the academy's gates. At the Witch Academy, the 3 witch sisters were chanting spells to force Ambrose to sign a confession. The intense pressure almost broke Ambrose. At the last moment, he used a chicken bone to create a master key and escaped from prison. But as soon as he reached the academy gates, he encountered the witch hunters who had opened the gates. The 3 witch sisters, thinking themselves powerful, used their witchcraft to subdue the witch hunters, but they didn't know that these 2 witch hunters also possessed special abilities. After the hunters chanted their spells, everyone in the Witch Academy was bound. The witch hunters demanded that the witches change their beliefs, accepting that God was the true savior, but betraying the power within their bodies wasn't easy. Just as the witch hunters were preparing to execute them all, Sabrina charged in, but this reckless act was nothing short of self-destructive. The hunters' arrows rained down on Sabrina, and she fell. Just as the hunters began to hiss with relish, Sabrina suddenly came back to life. She seemed possessed, and the witch hunters were powerless to resist. Sabrina's power was unimaginable. A simple sentence brought the dead back to life. The crisis at the Dark Church was over, but upon Faustus's return, the Witch Council knew that Sabrina had saved the entire Witch Academy and restored her and Nicholas's student status. However, her cousin could not be forgiven and would be executed. Sabrina told the committee that all of Ambrose's actions were controlled by a spirit bestowed upon him by Faustus. Finally, the committee demanded that Sabrina find the spirit within 24 hours in order to acquit Ambrose. They found the spirit's dwelling place, and Sabrina used her powers to resurrect the dead rat. They brought the rat home, preparing it as evidence for the court the next day. But what they didn't expect was that Sabrina's aunt, after her honeymoon, had completely changed. She too was under Faustus's witchcraft control. Faustus, now aware of Sabrina's plan, ordered Zelda to go home, find the rat, and grind it into minced meat using a meat grinder. It was then that they realized Zelda had been cursed. Finally, Sabrina used her telekinetic abilities to retrieve the music box controlling Zelda, thus breaking the spell. Zelda regained consciousness, and they finally understood Faustus's plot. Faustus knew Sabrina possessed special abilities. If she demonstrated these miraculous new powers at tomorrow's execution, they would consider her a heretic and burn her alive. Fortunately, knowing Faustus's plan beforehand, Sabrina had a way to counter. A man was led to the execution platform. Faustus ordered the executioner to carry out the execution. The blade fell with a clang, but the man's head didn't fall. Instead, the executioner's head was severed from his neck. Faustus believed this was certainly caused by the man's cousin, Sabrina, but they had been watching Sabrina from the beginning, and she hadn't done anything. It turned out that Hilda had used witchcraft to transfer the injury to the executioner. At this point, Faustus sent another student to carry out the execution. Sabrina said that if Faustus wanted Ambrose dead so badly, why didn't he do it himself? Provoked by a child, Faustus, out of pride, went up to the platform to carry out the execution. But after some thought, Faustus came up with a better idea: to have Sabrina carry out Ambrose's execution. At this crucial moment, Satan suddenly appeared and spared Ambrose. Because Satan had given the order, Ambrose finally escaped. But they didn't know that Satan's appearance was actually due to Sabrina's superpowers. Although Faustus was very dissatisfied because of Faustus's actions that angered Satan, the witch council decided to strip Faustus of his papacy. Ambrose's crisis finally passed, but Sabrina still wanted to fulfill her father's dying wish. She wanted to connect the wizarding world and the mortal world, so she organized a party, preparing to show off her special witch abilities in front of everyone. This could be a major reform, but then another incident occurred. Nicholas and Susie discovered a prophecy about Sabrina in the mine. Everyone went down into the mine and were surprised to see a portrait of Sabrina on the wall. The appearance in the portrait was exactly the same as the day Sabrina was resurrected. The portrait showed Sabrina as a messenger from hell. Sabrina again sought help from Lilith. Lilith told Sabrina that the painting indicated Sabrina would open the gates of hell, plunging the world into apocalypse. To prevent the prophecy from happening, the only way was to strip Sabrina of her witchcraft, perhaps avoiding everything. So Sabrina sought out Ambrose, asking him to perform witchcraft to create a doppelganger. This would transfer the dark energy within Sabrina. By destroying the doppelganger, Sabrina would not lead to the apocalypse. Finally, under Sabrina's pleading, Ambrose performed witchcraft to create a doppelganger for Sabrina. The next day, Sabrina woke up to find the tree stump beside her unchanged. They assumed the spell had failed and went outside to find another way. In reality, the spell had worked. It was just that Sabrina's doppelganger had woken up earlier and placed a new tree stump on the bed. The doppelganger, dressed in Sabrina's clothes, sought out Nicholas while they were out. She wanted to start over with Nicholas, but he was already with Rosalind. He flatly rejected Sabrina. At this point, the doppelganger's expression changed. She then went to Rosalind, seeking her friend's support. But Rosalind also noticed something unusual about Sabrina. The moment Rosalind touched Sabrina, she saw the truth through her psychic abilities and realized this wasn't the real Sabrina. Afterward, Sabrina's doppelganger went to find Susie. Similarly, Susie couldn't understand why Sabrina had changed so suddenly, so Sabrina rolled her eyes. It turned out that the clone, wanting to understand her friends, had sought them out, but everything had disappointed her. So the clone used Sabrina's clone creating method to create the three friends. But she didn't expect Susie to wake up earlier in the process. Susie saw Nicholas's clone about to succeed, so she knocked Nicholas's clone unconscious with a rock, then picked up an even larger rock and crushed Nicholas's clone to death. After that, Susie destroyed the two remaining trees, and Nicholas and Rosalind woke up. At this moment, Sabrina's clone also arrived, saw the scene of devastation, and screamed in pain. On the other side, Nicholas made a major discovery. While searching for documents related to prophecy, he found a prophetic code. The prophecy about hell, inscribed on it, stated that the girl who opened the gates of hell would perform an exorcism ritual using resurrection magic and enter the boundaries of hell. Sabrina then remembered that she had done all of this, all under Lilith's guidance. So Sabrina and Nicholas sought out Lilith and asked Nicholas to temporarily seal her away with magic. Sabrina then went to find her doppelganger. At this time, the doppelganger was at home, overwhelmed with grief at the death of her friends. Ambrose also went to comfort her. At this point, Ambrose noticed something unusual. The real Sabrina had returned. The main body and the doppelganger met, but the doppelganger showed no fear because all of Sabrina's magic had been transferred to the doppelganger. Ambrose also knew that without magic, Sabrina couldn't possibly be a match for the doppelganger, so he devised a plan. Ambrose told the doppelganger that for fairness, they should duel with guns. The two walked back to back for 10 steps, and whoever was faster would survive. Therefore, they agreed to a duel at midnight. But Ambrose's desperate measure had a reason. The clone, having only recently arrived in the world, had inherited Sabrina's memories and didn't understand the wickedness of human nature. Soon, the time for the duel arrived, and the two walked back to back. But just as Ambrose counted to 8, Sabrina suddenly turned and shot at the clone. The clone was dead, and Sabrina thought she had averted a catastrophe, but she didn't realize she had shot herself. The final step in fulfilling the prophecy. The prophecy had come true. Satan was about to return to the mortal world in human form, and Sabrina would become Satan's queen. At this moment, Lilith finally realized that Satan had always deceived her. Satan would absolutely not let her become queen, so Lilith decided to help everyone defeat Satan and then rule hell herself. To defeat Satan, one must find his weakness, and the person who has been with Satan the longest is Lilith. A very long time ago, Lilith was fleeing a famine. It was at this time that she met Lucifer, the morning star, banished to earth. He had 2 wounds on his back. Lilith healed Lucifer's wounds and became his first woman. But not long after, Lucifer's curse struck again. As time passed, Lucifer transformed into a goat-headed, human-bodied monster and became the Satan we know today. Just as they were discussing this, Satan arrived on earth in human form. Sabrina accompanied Lilith to meet Satan. Satan told Sabrina that she was his destined queen of hell, who would open the gates of hell for him. He even revealed the shocking news that Sabrina was not the daughter of a witch. Satan was her biological father. Years ago, her parents, unable to have children, had prayed to Satan. Satan also seized this opportunity to find a way to return to the human world. Sabrina refused to accept such a fate and did not want to be Satan's child. The resistance of everyone gave Lilith hope. Satan's weakness was the wound on his back, where his angelic wings were damaged. Sabrina went to the meeting place with Satan. She pretended to submit to him, and while he was off guard, she used a weapon to pin his legs down. Then Ambrose and her aunts rushed in. Although they wounded Satan, their weapons were too ordinary to kill him. Satan used the aunt's courage to threaten Sabrina, forcing her to blow the trumpet to open the gates of hell. The trumpet sounded, and the gates of hell were about to open. Fortunately, Sabrina's friends used a spell to temporarily seal the gates of hell. On the other side, Faustus discovered that Sabrina was about to become Satan's queen. Faustus did not want to bow down to Sabrina, so he decided to flee. But before leaving, Faustus poisoned everyone in the witch church. Everyone was dying, and Prudence, with no other option, could only seek help from Sabrina's family. With the help of her aunts, the witches of the witch church barely survived, but their danger was not over. Satan's coronation was the next day. Sabrina suddenly remembered the underworld mechanism that her father had created years ago, which could seal all demons. This rekindled their hope. If everyone worked together, they could surely seal Satan. Soon it was the poor coronation day. Sabrina, dressed in magnificent attire, appeared and received the crown that Satan placed on her head. As Sabrina and Satan danced, the surrounding witches chanted spells. At this moment, Ambrose threw out the underworld mechanism. After a loud explosion, Satan was sealed in a magic box, but they still underestimated Satan. No prison could hold him captive. Lilith told everyone that they needed a better and stronger prison. Lilith told everyone that the strongest prison was human flesh and bone, the most sacred bond of nature. Sabrina wanted to sacrifice herself, but Nicholas stopped her. As the most powerful sealer of the Witch Academy, Nicholas stepped forward. He sealed Satan into his own body. Finally, to restore peace to the human world, they had to send Satan and Nicholas, who was sealing Satan, back to hell. Sabrina also returned her queen's crown to Lilith, making her the new queen of hell. Lilith helped Sabrina restore her magical powers. Then she took Nicholas back to hell. But the story wasn't over yet. Sabrina was not satisfied with the status quo. She would stir up another storm. Sabrina wanted to go to hell to rescue Nicholas. They smeared themselves with the water of the dead and wore the shoes of the dead. All of this was their preparation before descending into hell, because only the dead could walk there. Then, they went before a painting of hell and chanted a spell. After a chaotic moment, everyone arrived in hell. At this point, a man approached, and Sabrina asked him how to find the Queen of Hell. Coincidentally, the man knew the way to the Hell Palace. They just needed to follow this crooked path to reach the Hell Palace. palace. On the other side, the Queen of Hell also knew that Sabrina and everyone had arrived in Hell and understood their reasons for coming. To stop them, she arranged for Iron Men to block their path. At the same time, Sabrina and everyone entered the Forest of Suffering. Suddenly, an Iron Man rushed out and attacked Nicholas fiercely. Nicholas, being immortal, was no match for the demon of Hell. Fortunately, the witch Sabrina was there. She used magic to restrain Iron Man, saving Nicholas from death by the Iron Man's axe. At this moment, Harvey suddenly realized that Iron Man's appearance was exactly like his deceased brother. While Nicholas was still doubting, Sabrina raised her hunting rifle and shot Iron Man dead. Lilith had intended to continue sending people to block their way, but bad news arrived from the other side. The other demon lords in Hell refused to recognize Lilith's position as queen and were preparing to rebel. Sabrina's arrival in Hell conveniently gave Lilith a countermeasure. She ordered her subordinates to take Sabrina and everyone to the palace. Sabrina finally met the person she had longed for day and night. Since Nicholas used his body to seal Satan, his current state was like that of someone who had lost their soul. In reality, within his body, he was fighting Satan every day, constantly tormented by Satan. At this moment, Sabrina also revealed her purpose for coming to Hell. She wanted to take Nicholas away, and she had other plans for Satan within Nicholas's body. She would find another cage for Satan. Lilith agreed to Sabrina's request, but in return, Sabrina had to help Lilith solidify her position as queen. Sabrina's body carried a distorted stream of Satan, and Lilith needed Sabrina to once again crown her queen of Hell in front of all the demons in Hell. The deal was done. Afterward, Lilith convened an internal meeting and introduced Sabrina to everyone. Lilith presented Sabrina as Satan's daughter. Because Satan was absent, Sabrina had come to officially bestow upon her the title of Queen of Hell. But the three Plague Kings were unconvinced. They argued that Lilith was merely Satan's handmaid, completely unqualified to sit in the position of queen. Furthermore, the three Plague Kings brought someone who claimed to be Satan's son. The three Plague Kings believed that Prince Caliban, whom they nominated, would rule the entire kingdom of Hell and bring it to its peak. At this moment, Satan, residing within Nicholas, suddenly summoned Sabrina. The next moment, Sabrina entered Nicholas's spirit world. There, she met her father, Satan. Satan told Sabrina that she could not relinquish the throne to anyone else. She had to restore the balance of Hell, otherwise it would cause chaos in the three realms. Furthermore, if she wanted to take Nicholas away, she could only do so by ascending to the throne as queen. Returning to reality, Sabrina sat on the queen's throne. As Satan's daughter, she was born with the right to inherit the throne. So, she became Queen of Hell, and no one dared to object. Sabrina appointed Lilith as her regent. The other demons temporarily left the palace, but Lilith told her that although they had temporarily compromised, if given the opportunity, they would definitely challenge the throne. But Sabrina didn't care about the throne at the moment. She only wanted to take Nicholas back. Then they chanted a spell. A cloud of smoke dissipated, and they returned to the human world. Sabrina temporarily imprisoned Nicholas in the Academy's dungeon. But she didn't know how much trouble her bringing Satan back to the human world would cause everyone in the Academy. As soon as she left the cell, she created a small crack in the magic circle sealing Satan. This also allowed Satan to find a way to take revenge on everyone. The man, driven by revenge, began shaking his head wildly, at a speed comparable to an electric motorcycle engine. But the very next second, his appearance completely changed. He took a deep breath, and then many small adorable creatures crawled out of his mouth. These worms crawled out from the crack in the magic circle. At that moment, one of the worms crawled into the Wizarding Academy's classroom. Suddenly, Agatha, one of the three witch sisters, began laughing strangely. Zelda then attacked Agatha. Both of them acted so unusually that everyone was terrified. Zelda didn't understand why she had hit her students. Just as they were still wondering, another student brought a worm, saying they had found it in Agatha's hair. A similar worm was also found in Zelda's hair. Seeing these worms, they finally understood the reason. These worms were all products of Satan, and they were also affected by it, causing their unusual behavior. What made Zelda even more suspicious was why Satan had appeared in the Academy. So Zelda mobilized everyone in the Academy to thoroughly search it. Sure enough, Satan was found in the Academy's dungeon. Zelda suspected this was definitely the work of her niece, Sabrina. But to put everyone in danger for the sake of saving her boyfriend, Zelda truly couldn't understand it. However, Sabrina said she would force Satan out of Nicholas's body and transfer it to someone else's. Zelda asked where she intended to go to find a cage strong enough to seal Satan. At that moment, Ambrose suddenly returned, bringing Faustus with him. It turned out that not long ago, Ambrose and Prudence had set out together, preparing to eliminate Faustus, who had harmed everyone. They searched for a long time, finally finding Faustus by the the lake. Faustus had changed considerably and seemed to be performing some kind of ritual. A sea monster approached Faustus and offered him an egg. In return, Faustus would give 2 witches as sacrifices to the monster. Seeing this, Ambrose and Prudence immediately rushed forward to stop him. But daughter is no match for her father. Finally, Ambrose found Faustus's weakness. Ambrose used the egg to threaten Faustus, while Faustus seemed to value it greatly. Faustus claimed it took him 15 years to figure out how to find this egg. But strangely, Faustus had only left the church a month earlier. Prudence had intended to devour Faustus, but Ambrose suggested bringing Faustus back for questioning. So Ambrose brought Faustus and the egg back. Upon seeing Faustus, Sabrina was overjoyed. Sabrina had transferred Satan, imprisoned in Nicholas's body, to Faustus. Sabrina thought everything was perfect, but in reality, her trip to hell to bring Nicholas back had completely disrupted the balance of the world. Although she had removed Satan from Nicholas's body, Nicholas was left with lasting effects. His left leg became deformed and he suffered nightmares every day. To escape Satan's torment, he even considered amputating his left leg, but Sabrina stopped him. But things were even more complicated than that. That day, as Sabrina and Nicholas were preparing to go out, Lilith suddenly appeared. She told Sabrina that hell had convened an emergency meeting and demanded her attendance. When Sabrina arrived in hell, she discovered that Prince Caliban had challenged the throne and obtained the signatures of 666 demons, making it impossible for her to refuse. The competition was to see who could find the 3 evil royal artifacts first. To win, Sabrina sought Ambrose's help. The knowledgeable Ambrose quickly found clues. The first artifact they needed to find was a crown, located in a place called Valentine. Ambrose also found an eternal compass. They only needed to go to Valentine to use the compass to locate the crown. Following the compass, they arrived at a tree, and if all went as planned, the crown was inside the tree trunk. A man reached into the tree trunk, and a crown covered in tree sap was pulled out. Sabrina knew this was an evil royal artifact and wanted to destroy it immediately, but Ambrose, passionate about research, stopped her. Ambrose believed the crown contained immense energy and needed to be taken back for research. Sabrina agreed and promised to destroy it together afterward. But as the two left, the tree trunk suddenly stirred. A supremely intelligent demon emerged from a tree trunk. It silently approached Ambrose's house and, while he wasn't paying attention, ambushed him. Soon after, Ambrose fainted. Through the crown, the demon found out that Sabrina was the one who had awakened it, and that all those who disturbed its slumber were doomed. Elsewhere, Sabrina and her boyfriend Nicholas were enjoying themselves at an amusement park. The demon also arrived, but they were unaware of the impending danger. A scream rang out, and the demon attacked Sabrina in the heart house. The demon's power was immense. Even Sabrina and Nicholas, working together, were no match for it. Just then, Prince Caliban suddenly appeared. Sabrina thought he would save her, but Prince Caliban was only interested in their competition. He grabbed the crown and fled back to hell. Without the crown, the demon became even more enraged and intended to unleash its wrath on Sabrina. Finally, Ambrose arrived just in time and used a special spell to drive the demon away. Meanwhile, Caliban seized the crown and won the first round. However, Caliban's underhanded actions enraged Sabrina, igniting her fighting spirit. She challenged Sabrina to obtain the next 2 artifacts, vowing to do so. Soon, the second match began. This time, they had to find the second evil artifact, Pontius Pilate's basin. This artifact was located in a very special place, locked within an eternal time loop, accessible only through time magic. Speaking of time magic, Sabrina had a way. The egg that Ambrose had brought back not long before could bend time. So Sabrina poured water from the magical egg onto herself. The next moment, Sabrina was transported to before Christ. But before she could react, she was captured by an official. Sabrina was locked in a cage. At this point, she was surprised to discover that Prince Caliban had also arrived. It turned out that he had arrived before Sabrina using the time stone. Then another man suddenly spoke up. He told Sabrina that they could not escape because they would be executed in a few days. He said the man would be saved, but he was cursed, trapped in a time loop, and also unable to escape. The man longed for freedom. His words gave Sabrina hope. On the day of execution, according to the usual procedure, the man was rescued by the official. Suddenly, the man, holding Pontius Pilate's wash basin, began to run away. It turned out that Sabrina and the man had exchanged identities using magic, thus deceiving the official. Meanwhile, Sabrina had obtained the artifact and successfully touched the time stone. Returning to the real world, Sabrina won the second battle. The upcoming third battle was extremely important, but what Sabrina didn't know was that while she was participating in the struggle for the throne in hell, the human world had fallen into chaos. Satan had left something in Nicholas's body, something that constantly tormented him. Today, Nicholas finally could couldn't bear it any longer and prepared to kill Satan, but Nicholas was still manipulated by Satan. In an unconscious state, Nicholas released the imprisoned Satan. And that wasn't all. The witches of the Witch Academy, due to their betrayal of Satan, were losing their magic. Because of the world's imbalance, heretics from the old era had returned to the continent. They wanted to summon the gods of the old era to rule the continent again, but before that, they had to eliminate all the witches. Everyone in the Witches' Guild was like ants on a hot skillet, but now they had lost all their magical power, completely powerless to resist. And at this moment, the witches weren't the only ones worried and frightened. Sabrina had informed Lilith of Satan's escape, which terrified Lilith. Because of Lilith's betrayal, Satan would surely come to devour her. As expected, Satan, having escaped, immediately seized Lilith, but Satan was still inside Faustus's body. Satan needed Lilith's help to perform a separation ritual, but the separation ritual required Satan to fall into a deep sleep. Lilith hypnotized Satan first, then immediately awakened Faustus's true form. Lilith said that now that Satan was asleep, they needed to quickly discuss something. Faustus asked what they could discuss. Lilith said they had to take some action to ensure that after she separated Faustus and Satan, both of them could continue to live. Otherwise, they would surely die a terrible death. So, while Satan was asleep, Lilith and Faustus used Satan's body to play cards. Then Satan awoke. Just as he was about to devour Lilith, she suddenly revealed something that astonished him. Lilith was pregnant with Satan's child, and it was a son. This temporarily prevented Satan from harming Lilith. Satan regained his freedom and returned to hell. He wanted to quell the chaos Sabrina had caused, but the struggle for the throne had begun, and even Satan couldn't break the rules. Sabrina and Prince Caliban had to continue their competition. By this time, Sabrina had also arrived in hell. She needed to reclaim the queen's throne and then help the witches defeat the heretics in the human world. In the final match, they had to find the Jewish silver coin. With Satan's guidance, Sabrina found the stone tablet that sealed the Jewish people. The Jewish man told Sabrina that his silver coin was buried with the first vampire. Sabrina needed to go deep into the crooked land to retrieve it. Sabrina went deep into the cave the Jewish man mentioned, and indeed found the coin in a coffin. Just as Sabrina was about to leave, Dracula suddenly woke up. Sabrina also suddenly lost consciousness. She was controlled by Dracula. Dracula opened his mouth, preparing to suck Sabrina's crotch dry, but suddenly, a burning sensation spread through Dracula's body. He said Sabrina's crotch was too hot. Asking if Sabrina was a goddess, Sabrina said her father was once an angel, and his crotch flowed in her veins. Then Sabrina knocked Dracula unconscious and left the cave. After retrieving the silver coin, Sabrina went back to the Jewish man, but as soon as Sabrina handed him the coin, the Jewish man in the stone statue suddenly transformed into Prince Caliban. He then cast a spell and sealed Sabrina inside the statue. It turned out that, while Sabrina was searching for the silver coin, Caliban had launched a coup, overthrowing Satan's rule and sealing Lilith and Satan within a stone statue. Sabrina fell into a deep sleep. At the same time, Sabrina's family and friends in the human world were also in trouble. Heretics had slaughtered all the witches and mortals, leaving only Sabrina's cousin alive. The heretics used Nicholas's virginity to summon the 6 gods, and the entire human world became their food. Even after Caliban seized the throne, he led the army of hell to rule the human world, but was also defeated by the heretics. Both hell and the human world declined. 60 years passed, and a figure suddenly appeared before the stone statue sealing Sabrina, and used a spell to awaken her. Only then did Sabrina discover a person who looked exactly like her standing before her. It turned out that Sabrina from the future had traveled through time and swapped places with the sealed Sabrina. She did that so Sabrina could go and save everyone, and after everything was over, Sabrina would switch places with her. Having said that, future Sabrina fell asleep. Sabrina followed her instructions, went to the underworld palace to retrieve the 3 royal artifacts, and then returned to the human world. The present world was completely covered in trees. Even upon returning to her old home, Sabrina only saw the remains of her aunts. Just as Sabrina was heartbroken that everything was too late, Ambrose suddenly appeared and pulled her from behind. It turned out that Ambrose had been hiding after the disaster, enduring for 60 years. Sabrina's appearance this time gave him hope. Sabrina saw the time egg that Ambrose had brought back earlier. She could use it to go back to the past and prevent this catastrophe. But Ambrose told Sabrina that the energy required for time travel was too great, and they probably couldn't do it at this time. At this moment, Sabrina remembered the 3 royal artifacts in her bag, which was also the reason future Sabrina had told her to retrieve them. The plan was set and immediately put into action. Sabrina hugged the time egg and chanted a spell. After a chaotic scene, Sabrina returned 60 years into the past, to the time when heretics heretics attacked witches and mortals. Before the heretics arrived, she had informed everyone. Although everyone was hesitant, they still chose to trust her. Friends and family were all saved. The final step was to destroy the heretics' ritual of summoning the six gods. Summoning the six gods definitely required virginity, which prompted Sabrina to devise a countermeasure. She instructed a witch disguised as her teacher. The heretics had thoroughly investigated and found 3 virgins in the town. The others had been saved by Sabrina. Now that they had captured Sabrina's teacher, they hastily began the summoning ritual. As soon as these plants distorted her, the surrounding trees suddenly turned into dry grass. The summoning ritual was completely destroyed, and the witch who had used poison crawled out from it. Without Lu Chen's protection, the heretics were completely powerless to resist and were quickly defeated by the Witches' Guild. Sabrina's plan to save the world that time was a complete success. Now she had to return to Hell to exchange for the future Sabrina. At that moment, Sabrina played a cunning trick again, blocking her path just as she had obtained the 3rd artifact and telling her what was about to happen. Thanks to Sabrina's warning, Sabrina was prepared when she obtained the artifact and exposed Caliban's plot. Therefore, at that moment, 2 Sabrinas appeared. One sat on the throne of the Queen of Hell. The other returned to the human world to live with her family. A woman with a distorted face suddenly appeared behind the man. He turned around to look and fled in fear. After he left, Sabrina emerged from the next room. It turned out it had just been a prank. Salem was Sabrina's guardian spirit, a manifestation designed to frighten those around her. Since Sabrina had returned from the future to save humanity, the Sabrina of that timeline had become the Queen of Hell, while Sabrina lived a peaceful, ordinary life in the human world. To attract the attention of her friends, Sabrina did not hesitate to use this underhanded tactic. When her friends came to her for help with a haunted school, Sabrina pretended to be knowledgeable and offered a solution. Then, several people, armed with hammers, stood in the haunted restroom, faced a mirror, and called out Salem's name. Harvey dismissed this as a joke. When he turned around, Salem was standing behind him. Several people hastily smashed the mirror. Salem screamed and ran away. They chased after him to the library. Without the mirror as a medium, Salem had no escape route. Salem tried to resist but was immediately defeated by Sabrina. Seeing her friend's concern, Sabrina continued to lie, claiming there was more than one evil spirit, but was exposed by the spirit medium Rosalind. Rosalind's eyes saw through everything, but Sabrina's lie wasn't wrong. More evil spirits had descended upon the human world. They were summoned by the evil Faustus. The first wave of attack was the evil spirits, and darkness would engulf the land. The minor spirits emerged from the mines, and wherever they went, darkness followed. Unaware wanderers enthusiastically greeted them. The minor spirits extended their right hand, and the old man was quickly crushed. The campfire was extinguished, and everything plunged back into darkness. The minor spirits scattered everywhere, causing the town to gradually sink into darkness. Zelda from the Academy of Witchcraft and Wizardry spotted this person and cast a spell to ask who he was. The miner's evil spirit seemed capable of manipulating people's minds, exaggerating their greatest fears. Hearing this, Zelda fell into extreme grief. Without the mirror as a medium, Salem had no escape route. Salem tried to resist but was immediately defeated by Sabrina. Seeing her friend's concern, Sabrina continued to lie, claiming there was more than one evil spirit, but was exposed by the spirit medium Rosalind. Rosalind's eyes saw through everything, but Sabrina's lie wasn't wrong. More evil spirits had descended upon the human world. They were summoned by the evil Faustus. The first wave of attack was the evil spirits, and darkness would engulf the land. The minor spirits emerged from the mines, and wherever they went, darkness followed. Unaware wanderers enthusiastically greeted them. The minor spirits extended their right hand, and the old man was quickly crushed. The campfire was extinguished, and everything plunged back into darkness. The minor spirits scattered everywhere, causing the town to gradually sink into darkness. Zelda from the Academy of Witchcraft and Wizardry spotted this person and cast a spell to ask who he was. The miner's evil spirit seemed capable of manipulating people's minds, exaggerating their greatest fears. Hearing this, Zelda fell into extreme grief. Seeing Zelda unable to defeat the miner's evil spirit, Hilda approached with a candle, immediately attracting the spirit's attention. Hilda slowly approached, chanting a spell, and ripped off the mask of the imposter, but only saw a black void. The evil spirit, stripped of its mask, instantly vanished, leaving behind only a pile of clothes. By the time Sabrina heard about it, it was already the following night. Even stranger, 3 homeless people had died in bizarre ways on the street. These 3 individuals died in different ways. One was completely crushed, another died of carbon monoxide poisoning, and the third looked like they had died of starvation. Although the manner of death of these homeless people was not the same, it hinted at something familiar. Ambrose Ambrose suddenly remembered that in the 1942 gold mine collapse, the way those miners died was exactly like theirs. They all died tragically in the darkness. The evil spirits of the miners who came to the town to haunt the homeless were probably from the mine. To clarify the matter, Ambrose hurried to find Sabrina, intending to temporarily return her to the human world. Several people chanted incantations together. Ambrose wanted to ask about the origin of the evil spirits, but the time for the dead to be resurrected had run out. He had to rely on his own speculation. Recalling the evil Faustus's mention of releasing evil spirits, this was probably the first wave of calamity Faustus brought. The source of the evil spirits' darkness from the outer universe was likely the mine where the miners had been transformed into darkness. The two immediately decided to return to the scene of the mine accident. Surrounded by pitch blackness, a group of evil miner spirits were guarding the area. The pit they were protecting was the source of the darkness. Here, they only felt helplessness and fear. Feeling weak and insignificant, they had no choice but to leave. Soon, the town was engulfed in darkness, with widespread power outages. If the evil spirits weren't stopped, the darkness would devour the light, and all living beings would face death. They needed to create light from the source of the darkness to fight against the evil spirits' darkness. And only Sabrina could do this. With her current strength, she needed help, and that was Sabrina of Hell. Only with their combined efforts could they defeat the evil spirits. After sunset, Sabrina's friends in the human world began to act. They drove away the miners' evil spirits that were spreading light everywhere, using oil lamps to guide them to the abandoned amusement park. Then, some of them chanted spells, imprisoning them there forever. At this time, Sabrina and Sabrina of Hell entered the mine. They chanted spells to destroy the darkness that enveloped them, but the power of the darkness was too great. Sabrina of Hell was overwhelmed by a feeling of helplessness, her whole body consumed by grief. Darkness once again enveloped them. Fortunately, Sabrina discovered the situation in time and awakened. Hell Sabrina. The two supported each other and chanted a spell together. The voice in the darkness echoed again, luring them into profound grief. Soon they could no longer hold on. Ambrose hastily called for reinforcements, enlisting the help of the witches from the academy. The incantation echoed through the darkness, and the two regained their faith, joining the witches in chanting. After the incantation, light returned to the human world, and the dark, evil spirit was collected into the crystal ball. The destruction of the human world failed, but Faustus didn't mind, because the evil spirit had attacked a total of 8 times, each more terrifying than the last. No one could be sure which evil spirit would attack next. The mother and daughter were praying before their meal, when suddenly a foul stench wafted towards them. The woman paid no attention, thinking it was just garbage left by a neighbor. The woman opened the door to see what was happening, and saw a homeless man standing in the doorway, reeking of foul odors, with a sign on his chest that read that he was cold, hungry, and tired, and asked if he could come in. Thinking of her young daughter, the woman refused the homeless man. She watched him leave without a word, but when the woman returned home, the homeless man suddenly appeared and stole her heart. He then slowly approached her. Soon, the homeless man went to the next house, because Rosalind had anticipated the consequences of refusing him. Rosalind and her boyfriend Harvey immediately invited the homeless man in, preparing a delicious meal for him to eat his fill. Then Rosalind used the excuse of adding soup to investigate his background. Horrifying scenes unfolded, and Rosalind was slightly shaken. Fortunately, the homeless man left, and the two relaxed. Harvey sketched the scene Rosalind had witnessed on paper. They went to Sabrina, wanting to find out the homeless man's identity, so Sabrina took the two of them to see Ambrose. Looking at the 8 paintings Harvey had drawn, Ambrose roughly understood that these were evil spirits brought about by the darkness. The 5 corpses with their hearts ripped out before him were all the work of a vagrant. His name was the Uninvited One, an unwelcome guest among the evil spirits. Those who did not welcome him ultimately met a tragic fate, their hearts ripped out and dying. Faustus summoned evil spirits, bringing 8 calamities to mankind. In the coming time, they would wreak havoc throughout the town. Currently, one of these uninvited evil spirits was harming the town's inhabitants. Faustus invited the dear Uninvited One into the church. In his capacity as an evil spirit priest, Faustus begged the Uninvited One for a blessing in exchange for Faustus's help in destroying mankind. The Uninvited One took out a piece of flesh containing immense power and placed it in Faustus's mouth. Next, the Uninvited One would knock on the door of the witch's church. Sabrina had prepared everything in the church, anticipating the Uninvited One's intrusion intrusion into Hilda's wedding. At that moment, among the guests passing by, a man without an invitation suddenly appeared. The two had no choice but to refuse him entry. After being refused, the man left without a word. The ceremony continued until evening, when a mysterious force suddenly infiltrated the crowd. It possessed each person. After a while of expelling them, it ran to the man who had been refused entry. Everyone looked at each other, wondering who he was that could devour their silver dreams. Zelda waved her hand, and the man reverted to his original form. It turned out he was the uninvited one, Faustus, disguised as someone else, to sneak into the witch's church. Now that they had refused the uninvited one, everyone would suffer the torment of having their hearts ripped out. The man, simply for being refused entry to the wedding, was tearing out people's hearts. Everyone could only watch as he devoured them piece by piece. The uninvited one, an evil spirit born from the darkness, could not be destroyed by any weapon. If angered, everyone would be annihilated. The uninvited one raised his glass in a toast. Zelda hastily snatched the glass and ordered the witches to subdue him, but Hilda quickly apologized for refusing him entry. Hilda said that this was her wedding, and she had the right to invite the uninvited. Sabrina pushed the angry witch aside, telling the uninvited that he had a better invitation. In hell, there he would find warm food, companionship, and someone willing to listen. The uninvited could attend the wedding in hell as Sabrina's companion. Watching the two of them being so sweet on stage, Sabrina couldn't help but think of herself. She asked the uninvited if he needed companionship like she did. Halfway through the Queen of Hell's wedding, Sabrina interrupted everyone. She wanted to marry the uninvited in front of the guests. Suddenly having a wife, the uninvited was moved to tears and kissed Sabrina in front of the guests. Then the two skipped the formalities and went straight into the bridal chamber. Sabrina let the uninvited into the house, told him she would be right back, and then hurriedly ran out. The uninvited suddenly realized he had been tricked. It turned out it was all Sabrina's plan. She had conspired with people in hell, using the wedding as in their excuse to trap the uninvited in the magical house. Everyone began chanting spells, imposing curses, and sealing the magical house. Although the uninvited was temporarily imprisoned, the remaining evil spirits were not yet dealt with. The third wave of evil spirit attacks was about to descend. The strange creature's purpose in coming to the mortal world was either to destroy humanity or to avenge his sister and brother, the uninvited. At this moment, Sabrina, the target of the strange creature, was completely unaware. Want to create the perfect boyfriend for yourself? First, drop a red candle with your ex-boyfriend's name written on it into a pot of boiling water until it melts into wax. Next, add flower petals with this one's qualities, appearance, and height written on them. Then, carefully sculpt the clay into a human figure. Mentally recite your desired boyfriend. Give him a passionate kiss. Then place him in a bathtub full of water and wait for him to grow. This method is indeed very effective. On her first day of school, Sabrina shared a room with a handsome transfer student and even got her phone number. The appearance of her destined soulmate caused their relationship to develop at an unusual pace. After having dinner together, they went to Sabrina's house. They intended to get to know each other better, but the man suddenly screamed. His tongue was twisted and glistening, as if something strange had torn it apart. Seeing Sabrina's tongue, he fled in fear. Sabrina, bewildered, stuck out her tongue, which was covered in suction cups. She covered her mouth in horror, but octopus ink oozed from her hand. Sabrina's condition was identical to the aquatic creature in Ambrose's morgue. The deceased had 3 hearts inside, and his bones had softened. He had transformed into a hybrid octopus human being. Ambrose was worried Sabrina would become like him. Looking at the deceased's aquatic creature, Ambrose suspected Sabrina had likely become prey to the third evil spirit, a bizarre creature. The aquatic creature before him was its former host. While no one was paying attention, it had secretly parasitized Sabrina's body, making her the perfect host to attack the mortal world. Ambrose quickly told Sabrina to lie on the operating table for a body scan. Sure enough, the octopus monster was discovered inside her abdomen. Because it was hidden so deeply, the two decided to perform surgery to remove it, but the octopus monster was too fast. If Ambrose intervened, it would probably suffocate Sabrina. At this moment, Ambrose suddenly thought of this octopus creature. After all, it couldn't survive without water. To get rid of the parasite in her body, Sabrina had transformed into a non-resident host. When the octopus monster lacked water, it would automatically leave and find a new host. So they sought out a water-controlling creature to dry the water in Sabrina's body. The strange creature brought by the evil spirit had transformed into an octopus, parasitizing Sabrina's body, gradually assimilating her into a monster. Fortunately, Ambrose discovered it in time, expelling the monster from her body before the strange creature completely merged with Sabrina and capturing the ugly octopus. Sabrina's tongue, which had transformed into an octopus, octopus, immediately reverted to its original form. Ambrose intended to take the monster away to study the evil spirit's secrets. Soon, he discovered he had been tricked. The strange creature hadn't left Sabrina's body at all. They are monstrous beings, born from the first ocean. All life begins from them and all life returns to them. Everyone will become their first slave. With the power of this host, they will assimilate this school and then this world, and then they will be nourishment for the void. But first, let's consider offering sacrifices to its monstrous siblings. Fortunately, Ambrose arrived in time, casting a forgetting spell on everyone. The evil spirit said everyone was asleep, and their scalps would fall off. Then they would wake up as if from a nightmare. Then Ambrose took Sabrina home for a full-body examination. Ambrose discovered that the octopus monster had invaded Sabrina's brain, and what they had removed from her body was only her physical form. The creature's consciousness remained in Sabrina's brain. Now, their consciousnesses had merged. After his previous failed attempt, Ambrose devised a countermeasure. Since the creature always parasitizes its host's brain, he would use the decaying witchcraft to release any infectious diseases from Sabrina's brain. Faced with this intense mental confrontation, Sabrina used her singing to alleviate the pain. The prolonged struggle made it difficult for the creature to resist. It hastily fled from Sabrina's brain. Ambrose used his wand to guide it back to the octopus's body. The octopus was frozen in the water tank, and Sabrina regained her senses. The creature failed to assimilate the human world. The evil spirits hadn't stopped their actions. Their next sibling, the demon of the perverse, had arrived in town. This demon could grant any wish. It could distort reality at will. After obtaining the magical artifact, Faustus chased away the trinket man and took everything. The earth began to shake violently. The witch, observing the villain's actions, watched intently. As the perverse suddenly appeared on the earth, images began to flash through his mind. Faustus, having recruited the perverse from the trinket man, one of the most terrifying evil spirits, was now causing trouble again. Prudence quickly relayed the information to others. Meanwhile, the wish was granted, and the world began to change according to Faustus's request. When the deafening sound ended, the world's transformation was complete. Faustus successfully became the supreme leader. Prudence looked at the two swords drawn in his hands, wondering why he was there. In Faustus's imaginary world, Prudence was one of Faustus's generals. The school had changed considerably, its walls covered with pictures of Faustus. Rosalind was astonished to find Sabrina's picture on the wanted poster. At that moment, a soldier passing by spotted the witch on the wanted poster. When he turned around, Sabrina's appearance had changed. The man thought he was hallucinating and turned to leave. The school's name had changed to Faustus Blackwood, and the students' greetings had changed to "Long live Blackwood." The school had become Faustus's camp. Even stranger, the oath before class was to be loyal to Faustus Blackwood, the supreme emperor of Greendale. They swore unconditional obedience and were always ready to sacrifice their lives for Faustus. Everyone had been brainwashed by Faustus. Faustus portrayed witches as demons, harming infants, devouring flesh and blood, while he himself was the savior of humanity. All those suspected of being witches were forcibly abducted by Faustus. Sabrina suspected they existed in the illusion of the perverse, possibly evil spirits released by Faustus. One of the terrifying beings was the perverse, who wished to distort the world, which is why others mistook Faustus for the head of state and transformed into their current forms. The two who remained sane did so because they had been exposed to the evil spirit, which had left them with immunity. Therefore, they decided to seek Ambrose's help and find a solution. Unexpectedly, Ambrose had also fallen into the perverse's illusion and was busy fleeing. Ambrose firmly believed that the outside world was probably not as Faustus described it. It was full of plague, poisonous dragons, and war. He reached the town's border, stepped on the gas, and immediately remembered everything. It turned out that the demon's influence only enveloped the town, which was why Faustus constantly slandered the outside world. At this moment, the trinket man called out to Ambrose, saying that a madman had stolen his perverse. Ambrose now understood that everything was due to Faustus's theft. The demon had granted Faustus the wish to distort the world. Although the trinket man didn't possess a demon capable of granting wishes, he did have knowledge of the real world. With the right methods, he could distort everything back to reality. However, after returning to the distorted world, Ambrose only had 30 seconds of lucidity. He teleported to Sabrina's side, and after introducing the stone's identity, before he could point, even explain how to use it, Ambrose's brain went into chaos again. He forgot everything. Sabrina's aunt suggested eating the stone. They could make stone soup to awaken those distorted by the perverse. perverse. After the fresh stone soup was ready, Ambrose drank a bowl on the spot. Sure enough, he remembered everything. Everyone began discussing their plan. Because Faustus bore the mark of Cain, no one could kill him. Therefore, everyone decided that while Faustus was executing the witch, they would steal the perverse from him and destroy it. When Sabrina distracted them, Ambrose seized the opportunity to destroy the perverse, but they did not return to reality. The demon on the table had just been an illusion. Sabrina regained her knowledge of reality and threw it at Faustus's head. A surge of energy spread, and all the witch's magical powers instantly returned. Together, they controlled Faustus. Faustus quickly dispatched people to search for the perverse. Sabrina made a wish to Faustus, hoping the world would return to normal. It was then that she discovered Faustus had been a fake. Sabrina suspected that, given Faustus's cunning, the demon had definitely been within him. Sabrina stroked Faustus's hunting dog, and now she wished everything could return to how it had been before the distortion. After a deafening sound, the world returned to its original state. Prudence continued to complete her mission, finishing Faustus with a single sword strike. But Faustus was immortal, so Prudence had no choice but to take his head. Prudence asked Faustus who the next wave of evil spirits would be, but Faustus refused to say. Soon, everyone discovered that hell and the human world were beginning to merge. The cosmic order was in chaos, and the human world and hell were colliding. Mortal beings inexplicably fell into hell, and hellish statues were frantically entering the human world. Both sides confused, believing they were declaring war, but in reality, it was due to the appearance of two Sabrinas in one dimension. The future Sabrina remained there after saving the world, breaking the boundaries between the two realms. To give the two Sabrinas a chance to restore order on their own, Satan decided it was time to meet with the lowly witches and demons. If the two Sabrinas failed, Satan would certainly take matters into his own hands. Sabrina, seeing the two realms devouring each other from the observation platform, decided to tell the truth to her aunts. Everything stemmed from her. She was ready to disappear to resolve the matter, but then she discovered that Sabrina from hell had also come to the human world. The two groups sat down to discuss a solution. Nicholas suggested that they could interfere with the magnetic fields of the two realms, causing them to repel each other. Neither group wanted their Sabrina to disappear, so they immediately agreed to this seemingly hopeful method. Ambrose arranged for Sabrina and the witches to stand at the center of hell, while Satan led the Morning Star family at the center of the human world. Both groups simultaneously summoned their opposing energies. When the separation of the two realms began to take effect, the prophet discovered that hell and the human world were too deeply intertwined. They might be able to successfully separate the two realms, but there was a high probability of destroying both along the way. But this method wouldn't work. They had to find another way. At this moment, due to the influence of the two realms, hailstones began to fall outside. A witch rushed over, holding a string of pearls, and said that it had fallen from the sky. Ambrose then realized that even the heavens had been drawn into this chaos. Heaven was about to fall to earth, and the universe was enduring unprecedented chaos. An angel, undeterred, descended to earth. The angel, Metatron, proposed a method to restore order. Sabrina had to disappear. Sabrina had broken the timeline and had traveled back to the past, but this action had caused two Sabrinas to simultaneously appear in the sky, creating cosmic chaos. Hell, earth, and heaven were on the verge of collision. They had to eliminate one Sabrina to restore order. However, the families of both Sabrina groups could not accept this. The Metatron then arrogantly announced a second solution, merging the two Sabrinas together, which could also resolve the crisis. Whoever gained control of the body would depend on luck. After the two Sabrinas had bid farewell to their families, they lay down on the altar and closed their eyes. Under the guidance of the Metatron, the merging process began. But at that moment, Ambrose rushed in to stop the ceremony, because he had discovered that the next evil spirit on the observatory had been the universe. It had been controlling 3 clones, and the universe had been on its way to colliding with humanity. The universe's actions would surely bring about its destruction. The Metatron had already known about this. The angel had worried that once everyone had known, they would try to protect the two Sabrinas. But the chances of success with this path had been almost zero, and it could even have created more chaos. However, the chances of merging the two together had only been 50%. The Metatron absolutely had to have one of the two Sabrinas, or both Sabrinas would die. To restore order, the Metatron, despite everyone's objections, forcibly cast a spell. The Metatron was willing willing to pay any price to restore order. Unfortunately, the families of both Sabrina groups disagreed. They used magic to control the Metatron. One person couldn't fight four, and the Metatron didn't last even a minute before returning to heaven. The universe, led by the two Sabrinas and three cosmic clones, fled to the human world. They had to sacrifice one Sabrina to enter the parallel universe and prevent his appearance. The two Sabrinas had equal responsibility for this, and they decided to settle it fairly by playing rock, paper, scissors. In the end, the Hell Sabrina lost. She entered the mirror that had opened a wormhole and prevented the universe from causing chaos. Before the already wounded human world could heal, they were met with the next evil spirit. The appearance of the resurrected Lasseroth brought the spirits back to life, wreaking havoc on mortals, plunging humanity into chaos once again. Lilith suffered greatly, haunted by the spirits, causing her immense pain and a desire for death. However, she was cursed with immortality, and only the spear that had pierced God could kill her. To eliminate a rival for control of hell, Caliban hastily helped her find the spear. Lilith set up her altar, raised the spear, and prepared to die. But someone arrived with news. The reason Lilith was haunted by the spirits was the appearance of the resurrected Lasseroth. At that moment, the spear in Lilith's hand was the best weapon to eliminate him. Lilith, already tormented by the spirits, went to Lasseroth's side. Taking advantage of his unguarded moment, a single thrust finished him off. The spirits that had been forcibly brought back to the human world, under the guidance of the prophet, also returned to where they belonged. Meanwhile, in hell, Sabrina arrived at an extremely strange place. To save the universe from colliding with the evil Endless, Sabrina traveled to a parallel dimension to stop him, only to find her home transformed into a film set, with her as the lead actress. Two strangers played her aunt. Under the cover of darkness, Sabrina went to the study and flipped through books containing notes about the Endless, only to find they were all blank, not a small EU. She returned to her bedroom to reorganize her thoughts, and pondered if there was any connection. Suddenly, a talking black plastic cat appeared on her bed. It claimed to be the film set's editor, but looked exactly like Sabrina's guardian spirit. Desperate for a solution, Sabrina sought help from the black cat, but she received no useful clues. When Sabrina was summoned to the set by staff, she was told by an actor nearby that everyone was terrified and had locked themselves in the restroom. Sabrina suspected that this might have held the answer she was looking for. That evening, Sabrina arrived at the door of the restroom and forcefully pushed it open. Following the tracks on the ground, Sabrina arrived at a dismemberment scene, only to unexpectedly find Ambrose there as well. Through Ambrose's words, Sabrina discovered that there was also an endless evil spirit present, its embodiment being a black toy cat, and that the entire film set was its universe. Ambrose had been banished for opposing him, and had been constantly fed to the cat. The people there were merely the cat's toys. Anyone he disliked became his meal. While searching for the black cat, Sabrina suddenly discovered a vacuum-sealed box filled with planets from the universe. These were the void evil spirits created by the construction workers. Once completed, the world would be devoured by the void, and all living beings would perish. Sabrina sought out the Endless, telling him that if the void continued to be built, everyone would perish. Sabrina persuaded the Endless to order everyone to stop, but discovered they were all void minions. Fortunately, everything here was decided by the Endless. Sabrina used her cat-shaped weapon to block the pursuing army, thus escaping their pursuit. Sabrina risked her life running to the mirror that opened a wormhole. Then, hell, Sabrina poured all her strength into opening the wormhole and returning to the correct space-time. With her last ounce of strength, hell Sabrina sealed the entrance, then collapsed to the ground, only managing to say that the void was on its way before closing her eyes. Hell Sabrina's sacrifice for humanity fueled the current Sabrina's resolve. She embraced Pandora's box, capable of absorbing everything, and passed through the wormhole in the mirror into the void. Sabrina opened the box, watching the surrounding planets being absorbed one by one. At that moment, she suddenly felt dizzy. It was her family in the human world calling Sabrina. Seeing the planets about to collide with the human world being collected, Sabrina's soul was summoned back into the body of hell. Sabrina, while her box and body were left behind. Everyone thought it was all over, and happily celebrated Sabrina's 17th birthday. When she blew out the candles, the cake disappeared. At this moment, the army of hell, led by Satan, arrived at the door. He wanted revenge for his deceased daughter. Hell Sabrina, Satan, in the name of a father, demanded that Sabrina seal away all her powers. What no one expected was that after losing her witchcraft powers, Sabrina could destroy Satan's entire army with just a wave of her hand. Without any help, Satan, terrified, quickly left. The mysterious power that had appeared in Sabrina was uncontrollable. Even the slightest fluctuation in her emotions would cause her friends to vanish from the human world. Ambrose quickly performed a full-body body check on Sabrina, discovering that her body was empty. A portion of the void and the box entered Sabrina's body. Sabrina became the embodiment of the void, but to protect others, she teleported away. Fortunately, Nicholas was able to use the pendant as a signal. When they found Sabrina, it was 2 weeks later. During this time, Sabrina had learned how to save those absorbed by the void. Meanwhile, Ambrose arranged for some people to tie ropes around her, and Sabrina's aunts slashed a wound on Sabrina's body to allow the molten blood to flow onto the altar and release the entrance to the void. A group of people clung to the ropes and entered. They had to hurry back before Sabrina breathed her last. The Grim Reaper suddenly appeared, waiting to take away the souls of those about to die. At this moment, Sabrina's mother held back her tears, muttering a protective spell for Sabrina. Memories of her life flashed before Sabrina's eyes like a fast-forwarded film, and she was about to collapse. At the last moment, the group returned and used Pandora's box to collect the void. But Sabrina closed her eyes. In a pure and untainted space, Sabrina's soul waited alone for the next life to meet everyone again. Thank you for watching the episode. See you in the next episode.